Hello, my name is Michael Thompson, and I want to do a speech for you today on how much liability insurance do you need. This is a topic that I come across every day, it seems like, in my line of work as an insurance agent. Um, I often interact with people who don't know how much insurance they need, and that seems to be a very big question for people because insurance has a legal component. You have to have it if you're going to drive a car, uh, but there isn't really a lot of information that you could say utilize to figure out how much you need. There's not really a guideline or a class or clinic that a person could go to get that information. So, do you have any questions for me?
Mr. Thompson, will you please tell me about your work experience?
Certainly, certainly. Um, I work for the nation's largest direct writer of auto insurance policy. I've worked in systems, but in the most recent decade, I've worked primarily in sales, service, and underwriting. What that means is I interact with customers who are calling for insurance or they are in need of information about how much insurance they need or they need servicing on their policies. Typically, in my line of work, the most the best rate for insurance is one that matches the risk. Not every driver is the same, and in insurance we have to find a way to be fair with all insured, all potential insured, or put another way, all levels of risk. At the same time, be equitable. That is to say, we have to make rates that are beneficial as well as servicing the customer. Insurance in general is a wonderful thing from the standpoint that if you had to meet the state's minimum requirements for insurance and did not have an insurance policy, that would tie up a lot of cash. For example, in Georgia, if you where the minimum requirements for bodily injury coverage are $25,000 per person and $50,000 per accident for all injuries occurred. Could you imagine if you had to come up with 25 or $50,000 just to have in reserve to drive a car legally? It would tie up a lot of cash, and then if you compound or multiply that by the number of people that drive in the state of Georgia, you could see a lot of money would be in reserve, just in case for what if. Insurance companies sort of bridge that gap. They offer those minimum liability limits of coverage for a fraction of the cost to the consumer. Um, that cost is, of course, leveraged, so to speak, by A, the person's ability to pay, and B, their overall risk profile. Or, put another way, from an insurance dashboard, from the insurance company standpoint, we always want to know, based on the information that we can gather from a consumer, what is the likelihood that they will have an accident? Obviously, some drivers have had violations. Some drivers have had accidents. Some drivers have been driving without insurance. All of these, or in other cases, have been had their driving privileges revoked or suspended or taken away altogether. Needless to say, the amount of these type events impacts the favorability of a risk profile. So, you know, based on that, insurance companies devise strategies and come up with pricing methods to rate the risk and offer a competitive price, hopefully. Some insurance companies actually go out of their way to price bad risks so that they are more reluctant to shop with other companies because, let's face it, insurance companies don't want to have a large percentage of drivers that are going to have accidents. Um, I've, as I said, worked in auto insurance for now actually the better part of 15 years. I have done a lot of individual study and gone out of my way to actually get certified in different things that have taught me other things that are beyond my scope of my actual responsibilities. Um, so I talk to people about other things besides just what they call for. Sometimes giving them more than what they need or what their primary concerns are. So, what do you think is a good amount of car insurance? No idea. Let me give you, no, any idea though?
Not sure.
No, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you just came into some money. Say you came into $25,000. You won the lottery. Um, you played a Georgia Lotto and you won $25,000. And you ran out and you bought a car, and just a $10,000 worth of car, and you went for joyriding. Not an unreasonable thing to think for a young person, right? Well, you're out joyriding, and then you have an accident, and you hurt someone, um, and the person that you hurt has injuries that are, say, $10,000. Now, and in your haste to go and drive, you never purchased an auto policy. So you had 25, you spent 10 on the car, and then you caused injury to somebody else that cost you another 10. And needless to say, you've damaged your car. So you can see how your $25,000 has now been depleted. If you had an auto insurance policy, though, it would insulate your assets, in this case, the $15,000, from loss or exposure to the accident or from the accident. That's what an insurance policy does. It is literally the transference of risk. So on the one hand, you have risk, the likelihood of loss. On the other hand, you have insurance or the insulation from risk. And that's what a policy does. It protects your assets from exposure to risk. Now, the question in this particular module is, how much insurance do you need? In the example that I just gave, I mentioned if you had $25,000 in cash. That same idea is a strategy that people can use to determine what is an adequate amount of liability limits. For example, let's say you were, how old are you?
21.
21? Okay. Um, and at 21 years old, if you had to sell everything that you own, everything, except for the clothes on your back, what do you suppose your total net worth would be?
Under $2,000.
Under $2,000. Okay, that's fine. Hey, you lost your press badge there. Very good. Okay, so, and at 21, frankly, I think mine would have been a negative $2,000. And I'm not kidding. But later in life, probably in so many years, you're going to meet the man of your dreams. He's going to be wonderfully wealthy, independently wonderful and brilliant, and he's going to woo you and take you away to a place, and you're going to live happily ever after in a mansion. And somewhere between now and there, your net worth is going to change. As your net worth increases, so too should your liability limit. A general guideline that we use when we're talking to homeowners about their bodily injury liability limit, their bodily injury liability limit, is that they should be no less than $100,000 and $300,000. When I say 100, 300, what I mean is that's called a line item limit, because bodily injury is expressed as a line item, 100, 300. This means that you have up to $100,000 per person that you've injured and up to $300,000 per accident. Likewise, property damage is $50,000. This speaks to the damage or the damage to someone's property. As it relates to auto policies, this is generally a car. Of course, it could be a fence, it could be someone else's property, a bicycle, God forbid, it could even be that you ran into someone's garage, but frankly, that's what it's for. Now, I say this, I title this as line items because some companies will actually do what's called combined single limit. This means that they give you a flat limit of $300,000, And for every accident, this is the amount of liability dollars that you have for all events, whether it's property damage, whether it's injury, whether it's rehabilitation, or lost wages because of the injury that you caused. So combined single limits is sort of an older version. Line items actually allows you a little more flexibility because you can lower one and raise the other. So there's a little flexibility there. Now, so today, do you own a home?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Well, what state do you live in?
Georgia.
In Georgia, the required minimum liability limit is $25, $50, and for bodily injury, and then $25,000 for property damage. If you were, say, in Missouri, it would be $25, $50, and $10,000. If you were in North Carolina, it would be $30, $60, and $25,000 as a minimum. Now, as a young person, your first car, you go out and you get insurance, you're probably going to go with just the barest of minimums. And we caution older adults, more mature adults, adults with assets, homeowners that might be later on more mature in their financial life to carry more insurance, simply because they might have more to lose in the event of a serious at-fault accident. And that's the main point of determining what is an adequate liability limit. Without an adequate liability limit, you are exposing the fruits of your labor, the results of your hard work, your home even. Because let's just say, for example, you get in an accident and you hurt someone really bad, and they are maybe you've hurt someone who has a very specialized field. I heard an example once where a young 18-year-old got his license, got in the car, jumped in the car, and drove off, and was involved in an accident wherein he injured surgeons. These were guys who had spent, years in medical school and then years in residency as a surgeon, and their hands were injured. Those doctors literally sued the parents of that particular driver because their livelihood was now challenged. Consequently, had there been an adequate limit of liability coverage, that level of judicial or legislative, not legislative, but of interaction from an attorney might have been blunted by the liability limit. In this particular case, they only had the state minimums, which was only $20,000 per person, which was woefully inadequate for the amount of damages that were caused. Now, that is not to say that people don't find themselves in their course of their lives in a position to require lower liability limits, because frankly, the higher the liability limit, the more that it costs. And in these particular times, there's lots of people who are in great amount of financial challenge. So not everyone that has a home always has the ability to pay for higher limits of liability so that they can be more adequately protected. You've got to do what you can afford. You've also got to do what's reasonable. You've also got to eat. You like eating, don't you? I know you did. Okay, so the main point in all of this is that you have to look at your own situation. You have to evaluate what's required in your state. You have to understand that every state is different. As I pointed out, in some states, the minimum level of liability is really too low, in my opinion. For example, in California, the liability minimum is only $15, $30, and $5,000 for the property damage. So, I mean, the last I checked, if you were to hit a car really hard, a newer car, you're going to tear something up and it's going to do a lot of damage. $5,000 seems hardly adequate. Property damage in general isn't really that expensive, but fortunately we don't live in California. We live here in the East Coast, and most of my classmates don't live in California either. Now, one thing about an insurance policy that you should realize is that it is a dynamic. It is not static. Likewise, just because you might have the higher limits of liability at one stage in your life, you might need to change those liability limits later at a different place in your life. if you were to, lose an income, or if you were to fall into bad health, or if you were, having to come up with money, you use your money for other things. People change their liability limits at different times in their life for different reasons, and that's not uncommon, nor is it anything to be ashamed of. It is the dynamic that is this life, so it's not uncommon for people to do that. The thing a person never wants to do, if at all possible, is to not have it. Uh, Insurance is a legally required thing. Uh, if you drive a car in these United States, you are required to carry it, and there is punitive action that can be brought upon you if you don't. Um, and there's a good reason for that. Alabama, as far as I recall, or Wisconsin, were two of the most recent states to begin to require all citizens to carry liability insurance. And frankly, it reflected the idea that they wanted to be more modern. The idea that someone could be driving in your state, be struck by a driver, and then not have insurance to pay for it, and be legally exempted because they just didn't have insurance, was preposterous. So, as a requirement, it became a burden on the entire state, and we all, as members of the state, share it, or as they all, as it were, because they were now required, and they were, some people were more prepared than others. Obviously, some people carried insurance even though it wasn't required. But you don't want to drive around in a state that doesn't require insurance of its population, for sure. So, with that, now, do you have any questions for me?
Can an insurance company raise your insurance rates because you're in an accident?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, they do. In fact, your driving record, that is to say, the compilation of whether you have had tickets or made vandalism claims, or had vehicles stolen, or have had accidents, whether your fault or not, all of those things are made up or utilized to come up with a composite risk profile. Most insurance companies, even now, will look at your credit score. Oddly enough, credit scores have been found to become indicators of the likelihood of loss in extreme cases. Not in a general case, but people who have had very low credit scores are almost predictably going to have an at-fault accident of some sort within so many months. So those are things that companies use. Now, if an insurance company looks at you and says, well, you don't have any accidents or tickets, and then all of a sudden you start having accidents or tickets, well, they're inclined to start looking at you differently. And frankly, that's the whole point of insurance. You got a good rate because you had a great driving record. So if you start having things that challenge the driving record, why would they want to look at you the same way? It's really not much different than if you were to say be in great health, and then you were to contract some sort of an illness or disease. Your health insurance company might view you differently as well, frankly, because the risk of you filing a claim against them has changed. The probability is greater. And so, yeah, absolutely. Insurance companies will and often do change rates based on your driving record. Any other questions?
Last one. How do you know you're getting the best rate?
Well, that's really more a question about consumerism. How do you really know that you're getting the best price for gasoline?
Comparing your price to someone else?
That's exactly right. You have to compare. Nothing takes the place of legwork and shopping and looking around. As one of my great consumer heroes, Clark Howard of Atlanta, would say, every 3 years you should bring out your policy, look at your coverages, and shop. Just compare to your rate to other companies and competition that service your area. Because frankly, insurance companies are always trying to get new business. Insurance companies are always trying to hold on to business, and there's always competition for established business that doesn't have a lot of accidents. And so insurance companies, while they do have to maintain a profile of equity, and they do have to maintain a profile that makes them profitable, they are also trying to grow their business with consumers that present as a lower risk. So, yeah, the only way to know is to shop. Anything else?
No, sir.
You're sure?
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you for your participation in how much liability insurance do you need. The main point I want you to take away from this is that the amount of insurance you need is always a value judgment based decision. There is no educational requirement for automobile liability insurance. You, therefore, are obligated to educate yourself. Uh, there are loads of places and websites where you can learn. I recommend that you take a little time to read over your policy, learn the terms that are relevant to what you're looking for, and become more educated about what it is you're pursuing. Um, Insurance companies generally use as one of their strategies just plain old inertia. You've been doing this for so long, you wouldn't dare do anything else. So if you keep doing the same thing, they'll keep doing the same thing, and they'll gradually raise your rates, and hopefully you won't notice or care or change. And so that works in their favor. By all means, you should always shop. You should always be vigilant. You should always keep an eye out for what's a good value. And as it relates to the cost, or as it relates to the amount of coverage, there's a certain place in your life where, frankly, you have to have a certain amount of insurance just for peace of mind. Peace of mind, in this example, has a value that is greater than the dollar. All right? Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.